Welcome to another episode of Distory. My name is Kirk from walruscarp.com, and with me, as always, is the fantastic, amazing author and Disney historian, Kate the Disney Cicerone. Kate, how are we doing this evening?
I'm doing really good. I'm really enjoying this series that we've been in, digging into the history of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, and I'm super excited for tonight to finally get to Mine Train through Nature's Wonderland. I no longer have to yell at you for saying with the wrong color train, with the Rainbow Caverns Mine Train.
I'm just waiting for you to yell at me about something else.
That probably will happen.
Yes, but no, I'm with you. I feel that, again, I had said this before. When I went to Disneyland, I didn't realize how much history was with this specific attraction. It had a longevity of time in which it operated. It also had an amazing touch from Mark Davis, which we're going to dive into, which is integral to kind of giving us some texture, especially to leading us to our main attraction from this entire episode series, to Big Thunder.
I thought we could begin this episode with kind of some of the changes, the big overall changes to the ride, but then we'll move scene by scene through the attraction to kind of to get down to the nitty-gritty details of all the things that maybe, people miss or that they can reminisce about them. But we can start with the changes, overall changes. So this attraction had a $1.8 million overhaul in 1960. That was the preliminary cost estimate of was actually $900,000 that was given by Bank of America appraisers in 1959. So it obviously cost way more than what they originally had planned, which is just par for the course for Disney. But by 1963, the cost grew to $2.5 million, essentially, which was a combined cost that was more than the Statue of Liberty, Grant's Tomb, and the original production of Ben-Hur combined. So it was expensive, is what we're getting down to.
Please tell me you read that somewhere and didn't come up with you were like, hang on, let me find the most relevant things that everyone here would understand and know with my selection of commonplace costs.
I feel like the only one.
This is what's in Kate's head, by the way, is like these normal things.
I feel like the only one people would recognize is the Statue of Liberty from that list. I did read it somewhere, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. So, sorry. Anyway, yeah. So
we're just getting started. Welcome to Distory.
So Joe Fowler was the Disneyland Operations Committee, and Earl Vilmer oversaw the construction and maintenance division. So they're the ones that kind of oversaw this project as it went on. It became a 2,307-foot long track in a 9-minute show. If you remember last time, it used to be a 7-minute show. So they added 2 minutes onto the show time with this new attraction the overhaul of the attraction. So it's based on 5 true life adventure films, which are nature documentaries that Disney did. One was in Beaver Valley, which was 1950, The Olympic Elk, which is 1951, Bear Country from 1953, The Living Desert, also from 1953, and The Vanishing Prairie from 1954. So we'll see those when we dig into the attraction. We'll see a little bit more about specifically what they pulled from those. But that's just in general, it's true life adventures, what we're going for here. They also had, they added tunnels and Cascade Peak, which we'll talk about later. And they now crossed over a pond and a spur next to Rivers of America. Do you want to talk about that just a little bit, Kirk, where the track goes?
Yeah. So it would exit our Rainbow Ridge area and then go over into Beaver Valley, then Cascade, then go over this trestle, which would go right next to Bear Country, which, according to a couple of guests, that was the scariest part of the attraction because it was elevated right above bears that were in the water below. Then it would go through a natural arch, then out to, basically went into the Living Desert area, which through my research, this is basically Arizona for the most part, or like the southern part of Arizona tipping into kind of Mexico. So there's a cactus forest, the bubbling paint pots, that watering hole pond, They're going to be adding a dinosaur skeleton graveyard, and then we finish off with the grand finale heading into the Rainbow Caverns, and then finally exiting into Rainbow Ridge yet again.
Yep. Whoa, sorry.
Yup.
Yup.
I'm just going to say it. I'm going to break the wall here. Kate is jet lagged from an amazing trip. She did an awesome job live streaming, walking around all the parks in Walt Disney World, talking about her new book. And this is the byproduct of that. And I have to admit, I'm really enjoying tonight.
I've got like I've lost the plot. It's great. All right. So I have a quote from Art Linkletter, who, if you know, he did opening day of Disneyland. He was one of the commentators for that. And so he's like a friend of Disneyland in that way. He described this area as faithful recreations of the forest regions of Wyoming, the deserts of Arizona and New Mexico, mountain terrain of Colorado, and many other sections of Western wilderness. These are dominated by Disneyland's second great mountain, Cascade Peak, visible from almost all Frontierland and easily recognized by its giant waterfalls that plummet from rocky ledges high on its granite slopes. I also say that Bill Evans, who did the landscaping for Disneyland, he used more than 156 different types of trees and plants. So they also not only did the track change, but there was an overhaul like vegetation change to this area where they added a tremendous amount of trees and plants to it. So on a really kind of a side little story about Walt Disney, when he was doing one of his inspection tours on the mine train, he said, move all those trees, the ones that are next to the track, back 50 feet. I want people on the big trains to see what's going on in here. Those trees keep it hidden from them. So he basically was just going on the ride and he's like, all these trees that are right next to the track here, just move them back 50 feet. And they're like, move it on. It's like, replant all these trees.
Well, I mean, I don't know. This during my research, there's a lot of problems with this attraction in general, and there's a reason why it doesn't exist after 77. But the truth is, it was probably really challenging to see everything on this and would require you to go and explore both sides of the train because you're sitting on a bench seat looking toward like inwards. So basically your entire view has to be like over your shoulder one way or the other, or looking dead straight at a stranger's face. So I mean, it's not the most, because it doesn't look forward and you're looking out like your traditional Disneyland railroad, and you're looking inwards. That bench seat creates a lot of viewing angle issues.
It does create a lot of issues, and actually, that's one of the changes, sort of, that they made in this attraction is the staging. So in this mining car, they had the people sitting face to face and then craning their necks to see, like, or trying to turn around. And sometimes you couldn't even see the things that were there, which was a huge problem. So I have a quote from Mark Davis that says, I told Walt, seeing ahead of you is a natural instinct of self-preservation, which it is. He bought that. There were two kit foxes about 100 feet apart. One would move his head from side to side and the other move his head up and down. I put them together and this immediately creates a little tableau with one saying yes and the other saying no. I went through the whole attraction and did little things like that. And Walt thought it was great. After that, he became very interested in staging things from the point of view which you were looking at. So the whole idea of staging from a forward-facing direction, that happened at this point. So if you look back in Disney history, before that we have rides like Storybook Land canal boats, where the scenes are sometimes behind you while you're sitting on the boat. Actually, most of the time, unless you're looking across from you, right? There's also Casey Jr., which is the scenes are not staged in front of that necessarily as you're going. A lot of the stuff is to the sides. And then Mark Twain, everything was on the sides of the boat, not forward, but, you can kind of walk to each side. So it's not as important. And the railroad, too, had the Disneyland Railroad had seats that all faced the engine in front for their first couple of trains that they had. And then later they're like, everybody's trying to look to the right because they're doing a giant circle around the park for the Grand Circle Tour. So the later cars for Disneyland were all made so that they face inward so everybody is looking and at what they want to look at rather than having to crane their necks to the side to see all the things. So Mine Train was such a significant attraction in that this is where they figured out better staging.
Yeah, I have another quote from, again, the Mark Davis in his own words, Imagineering the Disney Theme Parks Volume 1. It's a very short title, and it's a very light book. These things weigh like 20 pounds. The first thing that I said that was wrong was that these mine cars, so you sat there 3 on one side, 3 on the other, looking at a stranger in the face, and you couldn't see ahead very well. So you tried to look over, and they tried to look over you. They couldn't turn to see. This is like when I go to a theater and there's a vacant seat in front of me. I'll say to Alice, his wife, I'm just waiting for a basketball player to come in and sit down. This is one of those things I thought was just terrible, which, I mean, happens to, I think, all guests. That's like a common occurrence when like somebody's in front of you at a parade, or maybe you're getting posted up waiting on Main Street for the fireworks to happen. And then sure enough, first firework, ready to begin. You just see him lift the kid up, put him on the shoulders, and you're just like,
yep. It's always, you're like, this was the perfect spot. And you're just thinking in your head how wonderful it is that it's the perfect spot. And then it's always, it's either the kid or somebody with a phone or an iPad, like right in front of you. Like,
listen, I understand people will record things, and that's fine and fair. I always say, keep your devices below your, like, where your head is. That way, if your device is here, like, nobody can see behind you. Or when I have to hold my kids, you just hold them up to no higher than you are. You put them over
like
your shoulders, forget about it. It's unfair. You're cheating.
Yeah. So there was other things that also changed with the trains. They might have changed color, right, Kirk?
They did. They didn't might. They did. Because they changed to a magnificent yellow. Look at them. They're pretty.
It's really interesting when I was doing this research and I was looking through some of my old pictures from Yellowstone. And that's when I made this connection that I think they chose that color because that was the color of the touring buses in Yellowstone National Park from the 30s to the 50s. They were this yellow color. And I think I even have a picture of it. This is what they look like now. When you go to visit, they have these yellow touring buses inside. But these are actually the real ones that they used in the 30s and 50s. They still use them for some tours. They're made by the White Motor Company Model 706. And they're still used for park tours for transporting guests around the park. So this would have been very, very familiar to people in that era, reminiscent of touring a national park. So it makes sense that they would then color the train yellow, right?
Not really. I mean, you could just keep them green. Why bother changing it? But he was all confused. No, I mean, listen, they
you're like, no.
No, they beg, borrow, and steal from everybody. And it makes sense to take something from a national treasure, from an amazing, amazing national park. But the truth is, they probably changed it for another reason. It's so that you knew it was a different attraction than the one you were on before. That's it.
Yeah, I'm sure.
A psychological change.
Well, yes, I think that they did change it so that it's a different attraction. But I think, why did they choose yellow of all things? I think it probably is.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Totally.
The train also expanded to 7 cars, and the capacity increased to must be 70. I think it was 74 guests. I wrote 7 guests.
Wait, how many cars was it?
7 cars. Expanded to 7 cars.
42, right? Because if it's 3x3.
It said 70 something, 74, 76. So, yeah, maybe this could cram more people that we could see.
Maybe with like kids and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. I also have a really interesting kind of note that was from the guide for Nature's Wonderland from the hosts and hostesses from University of Disneyland, which is the precursor to Disney University, if you know. That is what the cast members go through to learn Disney culture and to, it's kind of an introduction to working there, right? So they have a guide for a specific attraction for their hosts and hostesses, what they call them. So No dress designer can duplicate the wardrobe of nature. No prop designer or special effects man can do better than a meek imitation of nature's own trees, rocks, and waterfalls. It's impossible to compete with the aurora borealis or Pacific sunset for a backdrop. But in nature's wonderland in Disneyland, people from around the world can enjoy nature as it is, or as it was, with accuracy and fidelity. To bring the beauty of drama of nature to mankind has been one of Walt Disney's interests. Now, it requires the many skills of the backstage crew who maintain this attraction and the storytelling skills of the onstage crew to put on a good show. And I do have a little note. I didn't know where to put this, so I'm just putting it here. I have a fun fact. The cast member with the most mine train derailments, the title holder for that, according to the Order of the Red Handkerchief, which we learned about in a previous episode, is Ron Dominguez. So if you know the Dominguez tree in Disneyland, if you know Ron Dominguez's work in Disney, I think that it's funny that he has the title for most mine train derailments because he kept forgetting to throw the switch, apparently, is what caused it. So he liked to derail the train by accident.
Didn't they then implement some sort of mechanical switch so that it would be impossible?
I think so.
I remember distinctly reading that somewhere that they ended up implementing some sort of automatic switch system so that it wouldn't be an issue in the future.
Yep. I think you're right, from what I understand. But runaway railway Ron. That was a good one. I also have just a few changes to Rainbow Ridge before we kind of like dive in. Do you have anything else that's kind of like an overview of the construction of it?
I mean, the biggest thing that they wanted to change, right, out of this entire decision-making process is to make it a more enjoyable experience that is fun. So the addition of animals and sight gags was a key to making this a more enjoyable attraction and kind of punching it up.
Well, you think of like we talked about in our Jungle Cruise series, how it was a little bit dry in the beginning, right? It was kind of like, oh.
You would think a water ride wouldn't
here.
be so dry, but you know.
That was a good one. I think it was the same with this attraction as well, is that it did have some educational facts and fun things and stuff, but there was no real sight gags necessarily besides a couple of things when it was Rainbow Caverns Mine Train. So they did add so much visual interest to this when they added on all these new animatronics and things, which we'll talk about in a minute. I did want to mention just a couple of small changes that happened to Rainbow Ridge. And one of them was the Rainbow Ridge Opera House was added. And that had Lotta the Miner's Darling, who would perform daily. So then you can hear her voice coming out of the opera house as well. So there's Lotta the Miner's Darling. And a lot of houses actually got added to this area. It was basically like the town went through a bit of a boom. And so instead of just houses on a couple of levels down below, they ended up going all the way up the ridge. So they added a whole bunch of different houses as well as vegetation to just fill it in a little bit.
I'm actually really excited to see which ones still exist in the future. So when we get to Big Thunder Mountain Railroad, I'm excited to see which portions of the original Rainbow Ridge are still there. I don't want to talk about it now because it's a whole derailment, but yeah, it's right. It's really cool. I love seeing this progression.
Me too. That's pretty much all I have for Rainbow Ridge besides this. Like, there's just more buildings. There's the Opera House and there's a leather goods store. And there's just like more stuff in general. They just filled it out a little bit. I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of any of the specific animals because I think we'll do that as we move into the attraction. But I do want to talk about overall the animatronics and why we have so many animals. So there's more than 200 animals that were added in 1960 to this attraction. And it was touted as the most elaborate and ambitious animation project ever attempted. So this was not as sophisticated as later audio animatronics. So you're thinking like Mr. Lincoln, you're thinking Tiki Birds, not quite at that level yet. But they did have some animation, usually like one or two simple movements. You think of like the ones that they added to the Jungle Cruise around the same time. Same kind of idea where they have like one or two like move back and forth or up and down, those kinds of things, right? Most of this movement was made with electronic, hydraulic, pneumatic technology combined with cam lever technology. And they really just took advantage of a whole bunch of recently declassified NASA and military technology that now was available to them, right? We talked about the magnetic tape that came from the Polaris submarine technology for the Tiki Room. They also had new plastics, fabrics, metals, and solenoids to work with as well. So they just had this like a massive new technology that they could do things with. So they did. They also had new hydraulic and smaller servo mechanisms. So everything got smaller where it used to be gigantic. So they had more options of what to do with it. And Kirk is demonstrating said movement as a robot.
Oh, this is it. I memorized this. This is exactly what they do in the ride.
What animal does that?
The
beavers chopping.
like a karate chop. Is that what you think? The beavers, how they? Wouldn't it be better to be like a woodchuck? You know, like Chuck Norris, like Woodchuck Norris. Is this thing on?
So the funny part, all the cams and mechanics were hidden under the skins, or sometimes they're hidden under the.
Dude.
What? The animal skins?
I'm just kidding.
They're hidden under the skins or the ground holding the base. So from our Bob Thomas biography of Walt Disney, he said all these were formed in plastic, stuffed with mechanical innards, covered with real skins treated for weathering. So they were real skins, but they switched to synthetic in 1962 because Walt didn't like the idea of using real animal skins. He was very much an animal lover. He did not like animals being killed for Disney attractions. He didn't like the idea of that. I believe it was when they were doing the Grand Canyon diorama, and he went into like a fridge or something and he pulled it open. It was just like a whole bunch of like dead animals looking at him because they were doing taxidermy, and he was just like, we can't do this. Like, this is not what we want to be known for, is, killing animals so we can use their fur for attractions. And beyond that, real skins also had a tendency to be worn away faster and also get eaten by ants. So there's that. Sorry if anybody was like eating lunch while I'm saying. So the animals were then bolted to rocks and trees, and sometimes even cement or fiberglass rocks or trees would then hold all the electronics. So if you saw, as we go through these animals, kind of like you can kind of picture, like, they're not just on that rock necessarily because they're just staged there. Literally, like, all their wires and like mechanical pieces are like inside the rock or inside the tree. So keep that in mind as we look through all these animals. Animals in the water, like fish and bears and beaver, had timer controls and proximity switches to trigger their swimming and animations. Like, Kirk, remember like how we saw that in Jungle Cruise? How there's a infrared beam and the boat crosses it, and then that triggers the movement or the sound or whatever. This is probably from promotional stuff, I think, is where this came from. We have stocked our preserve with over 200 amazingly realistic animated animals and birds, including almost every species still roaming the North American continent. That seems like a little bit of an exaggeration.
Yeah, I think it was only 204 audio animatronics that they ended up utilizing here. And it's an immense undertaking for them to add these in there. But yeah, you can't have every single type of animal.
Like every species in the North American continent?
It's ridiculous.
That seems like, really?
Yeah, it's impossible.
I think that's all of the pre-ride stuff that I have. Mm-hmm. And then I'm ready to go to Beaver Valley when you are. Maybe you want to start us there, because I feel like I've been talking this whole episode.
Okay, I got you. I will. So I'm going to pull up real quick script that I have here. And so I'll take us out with just the little piece that leads us into Beaver Valley, right? It's a couple sentences. Howdy, folks. Welcome to the little mining town of Rainbow Ridge, the gateway to nature's wonderland. As we head for the wilderness, a couple of suggestions. Please stay seated at all times and keep your hands and arms inside the train. The animals get mighty hungry, and no smoking, please. because we do not want to start a forest fire. No joke. People would smoke, I mean, this is the 50s here, or 60s now. So yeah, I think that's interesting that in their safety spiel, because you would be outside and you'd be going slow. I didn't even think of that, but yeah, I mean, don't smoke. Now, beyond the hills lie nature's wonderland. You're apt. So right now we're about to be rolling into a tunnel. You're apt to see a whole lot of wildlife. So keep a real sharp hunter's eye as we come out of this first tunnel, which I guess is just like a hunter's eye. Like, are we looking for pelts here? Are we hunting?
Like hunting animals.
Right, exactly. We'll be entering Beaver Valley. Looks like the beavers are building another dam. Yes, sir. They're really busy as a beaver. Cringe.
Yeah, so you can see going into the little tunnel there at the bottom, and then going into Beaver Valley as the first stop in this new old attraction, which again comes from the true life adventure Beaver Valley. So it's just a nature documentary if you ever get a chance to watch it. I think several of these are on Disney Plus if you'd like to go and watch about the beavers.
Yeah, good portion of them are on YouTube too if you're lazy.
Yeah, there's 11 beavers altogether, and the documentary comes from 1950. There's a whole bunch of detailed sketches from Mark Davis of beavers like swimming in the water and whatnot. I don't know if you have any of those handy. I don't know if I've gotten mine.
I do.
Okay.
Hang on.
I've got this guy. This close up is everything.
Oh, hang on. You know what time it is. It's not a Disney without a recreation.
I'm ready.
Hang on. I gotta get closer. Pause up. Now, teeth. I'll give you the precursor beaver sketches.
Yeah. So there you can see some of the sketches, preliminary sketches for Mark Davis of like what the beavers could do. And a lot of them swimming in the water and with some predators as well, kind of watching them. From a ServiceSoft Exchange article, there's a little bit of information about the action of the beavers for the animation because this was such new technology. Please
tell us the action of the beavers.
You ready? Okay. Beavers building a dam, swimming, diving, and carrying branches to their home in lifelike fashion. These beavers are moved along on underwater tracks by means of a water jet. The flow from the jet is kept constant, assuring a smooth swimming action by a pressure reducing valve, which is hidden and partially submerged in the beaver dam. So that beaver dam is not like empty. It actually has like a pressure reducing valve system with the jets of water to keep the beavers like moving.
It's a lot in there.
We're going to give them the full dam tour.
I mean, Kate, if you want to take your damn time, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I do have a few notes on the foliage from Beaver Valley from Morgan Evans. As the passenger on the Nature's Wonderland Railroad emerges from the first tunnel on the mine ride, he sees beavers at work on their local dam project. Pine trees framing the scene are a mixture of Monterey's from California and Aleppos from the Holy Land. The birch trees are from Europe. The cottonwoods are from the Southwest United States. So they actually have trees from the Holy Land in Beaver Valley. Who would have guessed?
Yeah, look.
Oh my God.
He's petting that damn beaver.
Oh my Oh gosh. Okay, where was I? The mountain meadows of California supply the thick stands of rushes found along the river. And the other curious reed at the water's edge, known as horsetail, is an old-time resident of the United States. It dates back about 40 million years, according to the paleontologists. We also have native water primrose, which we inherited. It just crept out of the mud and joined us. So that's from Morgan Evans, who, along with Bill Evans, did the landscaping for Disneyland. And so horsetail, do you guys probably don't have horsetail where you are? Do you? We have it here. So we have them here. They look like, I don't know if you can pull up a picture of it, Kirk, but
Horsetail?
Horsetail, yeah. So horsetail is found a lot in I think the western part of the United States. I'm not a horsetail expert. I had this growing up. I did have this. I did have this though growing up around my house. And it grows usually kind of near watery places and like damper places. And what's interesting about it is what I've heard is like indigenous people use this. You would break it open. On the inside is something that will soothe like mosquito bites and things like that. It's like kind of like a liquid inside. So
have you ever tried it?
I have, because I had it in my backyard and it seemed to help. So, but I always learned it was like a prehistoric plant, like it's just been around forever. So if you've never heard of horsetail, that's what they look like. And that's what they also had. They planted here in Beaver Valley. I also have some words of wisdom from Walt about beavers. Are you ready for this?
Oh, God. All right. Hang on. I'm not. I will be in a second. I'm ready.
Okay. Words of wisdom from Walt about beavers. Everyone needs deadlines, even the beavers. They loaf around all summer, but when they are faced with the winter deadline, they work like fury. If we didn't have deadlines, we'd stagnate. So beavers teach us about the diligence about meeting our deadlines.
I don't know about that. I feel like they're telling us that it's okay to be procrastinators as long as you get your work done. Which, I mean, I guess in some ways that's very true. You know, in most professions, as long as you get your projects done in time, does it really matter how long it takes you?
That's fair, I guess. As long as you're meeting your obligation, doesn't matter if you complete it. But I love that it's like they lay around all summer.
Yeah.
But everyone needs deadlines, even the beavers. Maybe that's what he's telling those kids there. It's like, did you know that these beavers have deadlines?
The kid on the right is like, what's a deadline? And then the kid with the hat on is like, oh no, I didn't do my homework.
I have another little view of the beavers here. They're just hanging out there.
They are cute.
They're really cute. There are some that are in the water, obviously. There's not a lot of really great.
You can see one right here. It's really hard, but they do circle around. I actually think, hang on, give me a second. There is a quick video of them moving around. Like you can see them. You see them swirling around? Hang on, I'm going to go back. Real quick. Eyes to the right, bottom right. Here they are swirling. See them moving?
Yeah.
They definitely are on some sort of like turntable roundabout style.
Yeah, one, it's like a jet of water that's making them go around.
Oh, look at them go.
Yeah, they're cute.
They are cute. And look, you can now see these ones in the water a little bit better.
I do have something about the raccoon that's in the area with the beavers. Do you have any raccoon facts?
I do have raccoon facts.
I have exactly one picture of the raccoon.
Okay. What do you got?
It's not a great one, but here, he's kind of like looking in the water.
So I have in that Mark Davis book, it shows one of the sketches that he was thinking about doing, and it says the narration, Mama Raccoon sure looks worried. You don't suppose there's some dangerous varmint aboard this train? And it's different than the way that it's illustrated here. It doesn't mean that this doesn't exist in combination with that raccoon, but this one...
I feel like that is a 1975 edition. Does it say 75 at the bottom?
You know what? I don't know. It doesn't. This one isn't dated.
Okay.
But it's possible because it looks similar to the 75 ones that are around it. So it's possible.
I don't know. I tried to find that too, if that existed anywhere in the attraction or if it was like a concept that never quite made it. And I was not able to find that information. All I found was this lonely little picture of this little raccoon looking in the water.
He's so cute, though.
He is cute. And I do have a cost for him. He cost exactly $3,294. I think that's all I have on the raccoons. I will say something that I forgot to mention was that they did add a pre-recorded narration to this that was optional, which is kind of interesting that wasn't required.
Huh.
So they had a pre-recorded audio track that was by Dallas McKinnon. And so the operators had the choice of using the pre-recorded track or the live spiel. The downside of the live spiel was because those in the back of the train, because the train was so long, they didn't see what the operator was talking about until a lot later. So the show quality essentially was decreased if you were sitting in the back of the train, which is very not what Disney was about, right? They wanted everybody to have a good show. Having them do the spiel made it a worse show for the guests. So that's why they did the pre-recorded one. And I think it's interesting in this one, and he's not using a two-fingered Disney point. He's just straight up pointing.
Well, do you think that was the reason why they decided to do something like Living with the Land and removing that narration, like being a live cast member? I mean, there's cost cutting that involves that, but everyone gives a different little speech. I actually was really worried when they were making the Jungle Cruise editions that, are we going to get a rock audio animatronic on each one of the boats with some sort of narration? Like, I did not want that. Not like that would be really doable. It would be also too expensive, I think, in comparison to Skippers. But like, that's the one where if you're going to not have a pre-recorded narration, that's the one. But if they did it, they would probably just dump the Skippers and just play a loop and have they'll make a reason why the boats can move on their own.
Yeah, I think that would be an extreme measure just because of the history of the Skippers in that attraction. Like, they're part of the attraction, and so removing them would be very, very strange. But yeah, I did think about that with Living with the Land, especially those ones that are they're like two boats attached, right? If you got all the way to the end of that boat, you wouldn't be seeing necessarily what they're seeing, especially with like how small some of those areas are.
Right.
So yeah, it could have been not just a budget issue, but also a show quality issue. So
yeah, I agree.
Entirely possible. Okay, so we did beavers. We talked about raccoons. Another thing that's in Beaver Valley is the bounding deer, which I don't have a lot of really great pictures of. Do you have many pictures of the deer?
I don't have. The only thing I have next is marmots. But there's so many animals. I don't even have the deer on. This is actually a pretty good. This map has lots of details on the individual animals. So like beaver, bullfrog, squirrel, coyote. I don't think it's the battling Olympic elk yet when you're talking about the deer, right? We're not misconstruing.
No,
okay.
they're a totally different thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thrush jay, gray fox, cottontail rabbit, raven tree, raccoon, and then the marmots before we head into Cascade Peak.
Yeah. I have something for the raven tree too, but I have bounding deer, which I'm pretty sure are in this area because that's what I've seen from my research. Maybe they're just not on this map.
Yeah, I mean, just because, I'm seeing bounding bighorns.
Bounding bighorns.
Yeah, it looks different. Like there's a ram. Antelope, yep. No. I mean, it would make sense that if deer were going to be anywhere, it would be either in here or in bear country.
Well, the bounding deer are actually in Beaver Valley in the documentary. The bounding deer are in there, so it makes sense that they would be in this area. So I have a little story that is from Bob Gurr, who helped design the animatronic for this deer. And this was actually one that was removed within the first month. So that's probably why it's not on this map, Kirk, is because it was removed so early from this attraction. So Bob Gurr says the idea was that a deer would traverse through a triangular course through a mountainside forest while appearing to jump along the course. The jumping action was supporting the deer on a wheeled carriage with its feet connected to crank arms. The simple action looked pretty good. The carriage ran in a concrete trough pulled by a wire rope circuit. When the machine ran, it looked believable, Bambi prancing through a forest. The bugaboo that killed this insane design was that the wire rope just would not stay stitched together, unraveling every few days. Thus, it was soon abandoned. Anyone living today who remembers seeing it in action is lucky indeed. It qualifies as my worst design disaster of all time.
I wonder why they didn't replace it with like cabling versus like actual threaded rope.
Yeah, I don't. Well, it's wire rope.
Wire rope. What is wire rope?
That sounds
It
like
sounds
cabling,
like cabling.
doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Maybe they just need a better cable for it. Yeah.
Maybe it's like a flexibility issue because they probably were wrapping it around something at an angle that was, versus using
like
some
a
sort
triangle?
of like wire pulley. Right. Yeah, exactly. Like it's like
if it had been a circular, maybe, or wouldn't.
yeah, probably would have reduced tension or something.
Yeah, I'm not an engineer, so I don't know, but
yeah,
there must have been a solution for that, but it wasn't worth the cost by that point of like saving it. So they just took it out.
Did they? And they didn't just put it as a stationary animal because almost all the animals have motion here.
Well, I mean, they do have stationary deer and they have stationary elk and things like that alongside the train. But from my understanding, this particular one looked like an animatronic, like it looks like a mechanical thing that should be moving. So they probably just took it out from what I understand. So.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So that's all I have on the bounding deer. But it's the worst design disaster of all time, according to Bob Gurr, from all the things he made. Other things in Beaver Valley, you said there was frogs. I didn't see any pictures of frogs.
Yeah. So again, it's really hard to find pictures or video from this, but it mentions and this could have been a later edition, the coyote, because we see the coyote in Mark Davis's standing on the beaver dam, so that's possible that happened in a later edition. But bullfrogs, squirrel, thrush jay, which is bird, cottontail rabbits, raven tree, raccoon, and a gray fox and marmots.
Yeah, well, I guess we're at the marmots then. Should we do some marmot talk?
Yeah, I can do some marmot talk. So I have, when we get to the marmots here, I'll actually show you, this is like the worst grainy, it's like this Zapruder film of Bigfoot for marmots. You can't see hardly anything, but it's basically prairie dogs that are jumping up and down, and they make like a whistling sound. And the whistling sound was actually in the spiel itself, and this is exactly how it went in the script. Them marmots over the tunnel must be whistling, because it would be like, oh, you pretty gals. So I guess marmots were taking a liking to the ladies that were on the train.
Oh, they're whistling the women.
Yeah, that's what it said.
Terrible.
This whole entire script is actually really, it's pretty chauvinistic. There's this one would get a laugh, because I remember in Dave recounts. Hang on, why don't you say something about marmots while I find this section of him recanting about being whistled at?
Okay, so each marmot would raise up one at a time, lifting arms and chirping, right? So Walt used to walk the track and keep an eye on all these audio animatronic animals that populated the ride. And then he was sneaking up on Jimmy Walker, who was a former cast member. And so he remembered this story about Walt while he was working on the marmots that popped up on the hillside. He said, I was grooming them with a GI brush, combing them clean and straight. I turned around and Walt was behind me, and he said, you don't do it that way. They're supposed to be all ruffled up when they come up. So he got basically yelled at by Walt Disney, being like, stop grooming the marmots, just stop. They're supposed to look ruffled.
I mean, yeah, that's sage advice from a wise man.
There was also a golden eagle, which was in that picture that you showed, that was watching the marmots perched in a nearby tree. So the golden eagle would then open its mouth and screech at them and lift its wings and tail. So a little golden eagle in the tree. And remember what I said about their, and their mechanic part of them is hidden probably in that tree that he was perched on. And same with the marmots, of course, they're hidden in the rock structure that they pop up out of. Do you have any more marmot talk?
So this is a recollection from Daveland of when they wrote it. When we passed some marmots above the next tunnel, peeking up from the rocks at the train, the narrator said they must be a whistling to all you pretty gals. This usually elicited an embarrassed giggle from any young women that happened to be on the train. So, like, this was one of the more chauvinistic jokes that landed and was seen as, like, cute. There is another one that we'll find when we go to bear country that does not land ever. And it would get, like, horrible responses, like boos. So, we'll leave it at that.
Wow. I didn't find that one. I'm excited for that.
We got one.
We did kind of like bypass the raven. So let's talk about ravens for just a second. Disney's technicians have done well, too well, in fact. The birds in Nature's Wonderland are so realistic that blackbirds have been attacking animated ravens perched in the trees of Nature Wonderland. So this is John Gerlach, who was a maintenance person there. He said, my job was to wake up the Nature's Wonderland birds. You see, their beaks mechanisms would get rusty, and so they couldn't sing well. I would hold the bird's beak open with one hand, and with an eyedropper on the other hand, I would squirt some lubricating oil into the beak. Well, one Sunday, while I was at my bird waking chores, Walt slipped up silently and said, how you doing, Doc? But anyway, essentially, these ravens got injured because of the, like, crows and blackbirds that would, like, peck at them and, like, take chunks out of them. So they frequently had to be maintained because of that, because they would be harassed by the local birds.
Well, as somebody who is not familiar with raven o'clock or crow o'clock, what do you guys call it out there?
Crow hour. It's crow hour.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you guys have some serious birds.
Yeah, and the reason for that, if you're ever curious, is that they just nest in the trees in Disneyland. So they go out during the day, and they've done this. This is part of their, like, migrating patterns of what they do. So they go out during the day, and then at a certain hour, right at, like, twilight, they all come back into Disneyland. You'll see just massive amounts of crows every night around the same time. And they land and they roost in the very old now trees that are in Disneyland because they've been around for, it's the 1950s, right? So, yeah, it's called, I call it crow hour. I don't know if everybody else does, but it's really well known to people who know Disneyland well. This is just something that happens every night. And it is a little bit strange. It's a little bit like the birds. They all kind of come in at once. It makes for some really cool video and photos and stuff, though, too, if you catch it just right. And
yeah, we were over by It's a Small World, and it happened when Mel and I were there, and I was like, this is freaky.
Well, it just happens every night. So, like, you're like, oh, it's crow hour. And then you just kind of, like, go about your day. So, yeah, that does happen there. And so it makes sense that they would feel territorial of some random birds suddenly being in these trees, in probably new trees. You'd be like, what is happening here? You're in my territory. So
that's typical how crows and everything, how they react to fake birds, Some would say that's so Raven.
That's an old school joke.
Well, dude, we're old school people. This is called Distory. We don't have new jokes. We have old stuff.
We have old dusty ones.
Yeah.
I just think we should pause there and head to Cascade Peak next week. I think.
I say we do Cascade Peak, Bear Country, and then dip into the Living Desert, and that's probably good for next week.
We did talk a lot about marmots and beavers and deer.
No bears. Oh my.
No bears.
Talked about a lot of damn creatures. I'll tell you that much.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of Distory. We really loved going over all of these fun animals. Maybe not all of the ones in North America, but certainly a couple of them. And we'll continue to do so next week as we head into Cascade Peak and Bear Country and the Living Desert. Kirk, do you have any final thoughts as we wrap up?
Don't brush your marmots. They're supposed to look all flim-flammery.
That's right. Don't stop grooming your marmots.
An unkept marmot is a good marmot.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us for this episode. We really appreciate you guys being here with us as always. We love hearing from you guys as well about how you're enjoying Distory. So thank you for reaching out with all these really kind comments that you've been sending. And we will head back to Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland next week. But until then, we'll see you next week for Distory.